Hi and welcome back. It's really great to have you back here for an afternoon session. I hope those blood sugar levels are now totally up there. I myself have snakes. Life is good, so that should get us right through the afternoon. Now, I have great delight this afternoon in being the sort of lead-in to our afternoon session. And I'm actually joined today by Dr. Jill White. So Jill works with the Department of Justice and Attorney General. Dr. Nadine McKillop, who is at the University of Sunshine Coast, and she is directing a sexual abuse unit and is certainly what I would describe as one of the people I leaned on a lot during this project. Joined also with me today is Jenny from Civic Assist in Toowoomba, and Jordyn McDonald, who's also was essentially like my boss during this particular project. So the project actually came about on the back of the need to prevent youth sexual violence and abuse. And it is a place-based piece of work, so hence why you have people here from Toowoomba who've joined us today. Jill is actually working across 3 different areas. She'll fill you in on that more later. And our involvement was in 2 different regions here in Queensland. And there are people in the room today, Anna, Karina, Erin, and others who are in Adelaide, Taylor, who worked with me on this project, and Pamela over in South America still. And it takes a lot of people to actually get out there and actually have a go. So today we're actually going to talk you through some of the project and where we've been and what we've done and take you on a bit of a journey, and that's why we're out like this. So it's a bit of a team effort in terms of how this comes to be. So we just want to start by picturing a bit of a story of just what something like community action around a really intractable problem like abuse takes. And if you're going to build a bridge, you don't just put a bridge up there, do you? Like, you make sure that you have the right expertise, the people who can actually look at spans and will it actually work and will it stand up? Will it hold the test of time? And if you think about the Sydney Harbour Bridge, when that was first built to span that beautiful harbour down there in Sydney, it was not built for the load that it currently carries. So it's quite amazing that those people had the foresight to build something that would go and stand the test of time in such a great way. So bridges take a whole different group of people, because you've got to kind of start with the people that might want to actually use the bridge, and maybe they're going to walk or drive across that bridge every day, and like, what would that look like for them? What's going to work? How should it actually be? And this is pretty topical at the moment because there's a couple of bridges going up across here in Brisbane that you can sort of see. So like any project, you end up with the planners and the people who actually think about the fact that maybe we need a bridge. If we build a green bridge, we might get some more cars off the road. That's a pretty cool idea when you actually think about it. But you can't just have a plan that you think it's going to actually work. You actually then need to walk forward and actually understand, would people actually use the bridge? Because it's a big investment to make if we actually then put up a bridge and hello, no one comes. So community is always going to have a really critical role to play in, will this bridge actually work? But of course, for that bridge to stand the test of time, well, it kind of needs to have the right elements to it. So how is it constructed? What does it actually look like? Will it do what it intends to actually do? And that's where someone like the true expert comes into play. And you heard before when Pete spoke about the different types of expertise. This, to me, is what it takes to create meaningful and lasting change. So we will talk to you a little bit about one place that we have worked on, sharing with you the experience to date, along with some of the next steps.
To come on. Okay. Thank you for having me here today. As Sharyn said, I'm Jill White and I work in the Office for Women and Violence Prevention in Department of Justice and Attorney General. And look, in terms of the focus of this project, youth sexual violence and abuse, it has become a really significant social and public health concern. And as an issue, it has sort of featured regularly in the media over the last couple of years with increased attention after the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. I think there has also been greatly heightened awareness with social media campaigns, the Me Too movement, national advocates such as Grace Tame, community organisations campaigning, such as the Daniel Morcombe Foundation, and many other sort of advocates and organisations who are raising awareness about the impacts and extent of the issue. In terms of, I do want to sort of highlight as well that young people and children are particularly vulnerable to sexual violence and abuse. And in terms of statistics from the ABS, in children and young people under the age of 18 made up 63% of all sexual assault victims recorded by police in Australia based on 2021 data. And it can have really profound and lifelong impacts on children and young people. In terms of the Queensland Government is committed to ending all forms of sexual violence and funded 3 place-based prevention projects. The locations that we are running the place-based projects in include Toowoomba, Bundaberg and also Yarrabah, which is an hour's drive from Cairns. And the projects are contract managed by the Office for Women and Violence Prevention. And we're really pleased today to have the opportunity to talk about the Toowoomba project and our learnings and journey along the way. And I have to say, it's not just been government. The project has involved a real collaboration between our department, Griffith University, the University of Sunshine Coast, Civic Assist. We also had Samantha Wild from Awakening Cultural Ways, who ran yarning circles with First Nations young people and elders and community members. We also received considerable support from community stakeholders in Toowoomba. We had quite a few other government agencies who gave us a lot of support as well, the local sector, young people, schools, and community members in Toowoomba. It was a really amazing amount of support. Next, Sharyn. Fantastic, thank you. Just a little bit of an overview about the project scope and the aims of the project. The project involved working with young people and based on consultation with the Toowoomba community, we looked at an age, it was originally 12 to 18, but there were community stakeholders suggested looking at young adults, so we increased that age range up to 25 years, and that was sort of some of the issues and concerns raised there were that risk of online and image-based abuse in terms of online dating and sexting and photographs and some of the risks there. And we, as a team, worked with young people, schools, non-government organisations, government agencies and community stakeholders to co-design and implement a community action plan to prevent youth sexual violence and abuse. And the project aimed to promote safe, and the project was really focused on primary prevention as well as sector training and development to enhance capacity of the local sector to be able to identify and respond to youth sexual violence and abuse. So in terms of the aims, they were very geared around a primary prevention approach. So promoting safe and healthy relationships, strengthening personal and online safety, reducing the risk of youth sexual violence and abuse, and enhancing local sector capacity. And the long-term vision was to enhance the safety and well-being of young people in Toowoomba. And just a little bit about some of the underpinning principles for the project. I should say, it is, in terms of our approach, it was a very strengths-based approach in terms of positive messaging. We weren't working from a deficit model, and that applied to the messaging we used for the project. And also, I think, taking a place-based approach, it was really looking at community assets and resources and strengths and priorities. So that strengths-based approach was really sort of critical to the project. I think the other critical element was taking a led development approach. So we were really had the idea that it would be a really sort of community-shaped action plan in terms of what we would do and include and activities that we would include in that action plan. So we really looked to young people in the community to tell us how those outcomes could be best achieved. By no means did government go in thinking we know best, and I must say I learnt so much from the Toowoomba community and so much from the young people as well. When I think about sort of community-led development, it wasn't about going in as being the expert and I'm developing your capacity. I think I learnt even more from the young people. I think the other thing about the project as well, it took a real place-based approach, and in terms of place-based approaches, they really involve bringing together citizens in a place to address complex social issues. And it's about harnessing those community strengths, visions, opportunities in each community and working collectively to achieve the outcomes and vision that you want to achieve. So it's a real opportunity to bring community stakeholders together to work collaboratively, and collaboration was a real feature of this project. I think the other thing about place-based approaches is that real focus on looking at local priorities, local solutions, and the unique attributes of place. So the sort of primary prevention campaign action plan that we developed was very much tailored to Toowoomba. And for each of our 3 different projects, what we end up with in terms of those primary prevention campaigns will look very different depending around the communities, sort of what's already in place, what the needs and priorities of those communities are. And I think, Nadine, did you want to say a word there? Just some of the evidence coming out for place-based approaches. The Queensland Government established a Youth Sexual Violence and Abuse Steering Committee, and based on the evidence base and consultation and data, came up with a set of recommendations. I'll hand over to you. Did you want to touch base on that, Nadine?
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Do you want to...
Yeah, there we go.
So do you want just talked about the importance of...
a quote, yeah.
Yeah, so tackling... Yeah, it was up... Oh, we jumped ahead. Did you want to jump ahead? So there has been a big push now for really understanding local context and priorities, sort of tailoring prevention sort of approaches to local risk and needs. And so that has been a real... the Youth Steering Committee really looked at very different risk factors occurring in different places, particularly in remote and regional communities, and looking at how they may look different in metro regions or urban regions as well, and that we have to look very carefully at understanding what those local risks and needs are if we're going to then develop and design any type of prevention project, so that we're not missing those key risk factors and we're drawing on that local capacity. So as Jill has on the quote here, tackling sexual violence and abuse requires that really comprehensive approach, and we've been looking more and more at that public health approach to sexual violence and abuse. It's now probably the leading dominant model that we use, and it has to also look at key target areas, so individuals who are at risk of perpetration, those who are at risk of victimisation, but also those key risk factors around settings that we need to target as well. So I think for a very long time we have in Australia been on the back burner with primary and early intervention preventative approaches in Australia. We're certainly leaning on the UK and the US for a number of those types of approaches. I'm very excited about how far we've come in probably the last year and a half with some really innovative developments in Australia. And what I love about that, and why I was so interested particularly in being involved in this project, was that I've been working in this sort of upstream approach, coming at this problem to prevent it from occurring in the first place. And we're now seeing, we've spent so much time in response and reaction, and we've forgotten about how we can actually be driving upstream approaches to stop it happening in the first place, to really reduce the extent and impact of those issues. And that public health approach comes at it with that really multi-pronged sort of capacity to say, what are we doing to build community resilience? What are we doing to build resilience just in people, to deter offenders as well? What are we doing in early intervention with families and developmental prevention to do better in those spaces for the generations that come? And then, of course, when we can't prevent something, and we'll never prevent youth sexual violence and abuse completely, but when we do have to respond, we have to do it effectively. And so, we've spent a lot of money and time, and governments have spent a lot of money and time in reacting. But at that point, we have victims, we have perpetrators, we have broken families, we have broken communities. So for me, my work has been very much at the forefront of prevention. And so these upstream approaches, taking this primary and secondary level sort of approach, is both innovative for Australia, but helps us to catch up to the rest of the world, I think. And so some of those recommendations coming out of the YSVA steering committee really pushed for, if we're going to understand this, we have to understand the context, the risk, the place, and then we build something around that to really, drive those prevention initiatives. Hope that answers the question.
Exactly, thank you. I was handing over to our subject matter expert.
Do you want me to pass on to Toowoomba? Talk a bit about
Excellent.
Toowoomba.
So hopefully everyone... So can you give me a show of hands? Who knows where Toowoomba is, or who's heard of Toowoomba? Oh, goodness, thank goodness. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about the Toowoomba community. It's the second most populous inland city in the country after the national capital of Canberra. The traditional owners of Toowoomba are the Jagera, Guyabal and Jarawar tribes. And the estimated urban population of Toowoomba is 173,204. It's 125 kilometres west of Queensland's capital city, Brisbane. And, if you're from Toowoomba, you don't like to say that you're country folk. But we're definitely not city folk either. So we're somewhere in between. So maybe we need to come up with some kind of name for that. I don't know. But 5% of the Toowoomba population identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. 19.3% of Toowoomba's population was born overseas, so we have quite a diverse community in regards to different cultures. Recently, over the last few years, we've had a lot of Yazidi communities come into Toowoomba as well. Prior to that, we had a lot of Congolese. It's known as the Garden City. If you haven't come up there for around springtime, you must come and visit. It's really, really beautiful. And if you're a little bit Aussie ochre, you know it's known as T-Bar. It is a university, school and cathedral city. There's actually 50 primary and secondary schools within Toowoomba. And it was selected for this project because it has a really well-established service system with the capacity to support a place-based approach. And working in the community services sector, I can say that's definitely true. People within, the Toowoomba community it's quite tight-knit in regards to working collaboratively. Definitely after this project, you really sort of saw the benefits of that as well. So, yeah.
So the approach was a pretty simple one here. It was a community that had already identified it needed to come together to take action against preventing youth violence and sexual abuse. There was a lot of support across the sector, and at the very start of this project, our team stepped in and kind of worked with the local Brains Trust to say what really needs to happen. And at the very outset of this project, that sector had recognised they wanted it to be youth-led. And I'll just ask Jordyn to speak a little bit to that.
So with the youth-led approach, it looked at a group of 10 teenagers from the Toowoomba community. We were roughly about 15 to 18, I think, were our age range. And we were involved in different areas. So we had some that were from multicultural sections. I came from a youth group / civic assist area. I was in that zone. We had people that were Indigenous and the LGBT community, just different areas that could speak into their own designs how they saw social media, what sort of effects they could bring into it, and what they thought was best to capture the target audience and how we could best influence them.
So essentially our job was to walk in and learn from both people working in the sector, the young people, how should we start to tackle the problem of building an action plan. So can we talk about this issue and then ultimately, with the right design processes, get the outcomes of what community wants to actually see happen. So this project started with a stakeholder group that said, here's a couple of different tools and ways that we could do this. They were offered 3 different types of tools and given a bit of training about how the different tools would create different outcomes. And the community chose 2 processes, and I'll talk a little bit more about those as we go forward. But the organisations like Civic Assist, and they were one of many, like our team spent many, many days, weeks, hours out there in field, working both through the organisations, the people they were already working with, and then other people outside of all of this as well. So let's take a little bit of a look at the roles that we all played. Our team were essentially nothing more than the designers. We had a bit of a role in terms of starting to look at that bridge and what did it look like. We gave ourselves some bosses and approached this team of young people and literally on meeting 1, gave them the big task of you are our boss. So we need you to tell us if this won't work.
Civic Assist really played the role in establishing and coordinating the Young People's Project Committee, which was then later called the Young Voices United Committee. And really we're just making sure that young people felt supported. Our team has had a lot to do with young people from all of the community, but especially in regards to young people who have had some pretty tricky circumstances happen in their life or have been disengaged and that kind of thing. So we just really wanted to make sure that they felt engaged in the project and felt supported through the process.
In sitting in government, in terms of my role, it was really sort of the planning and helping with the project management. We sort of did some of the initial scoping in government, thinking about what locations would we choose, thinking about the target groups that we would be working with. We did the initial engagement in the Toowoomba community in terms of myself and a regional colleague went and had one-to-one sort of meetings with local schools. We met with local youth organisations, community-controlled organisations, and that was really providing information about the project, promoting stakeholder buy-in, finding out how people would like to be involved with the project, and getting some of those very initial ideas. We also were aware, thinking about what sorts of expertise. We did the contracting to bring our subject matter expert on, our backbone organisation and our design experts, and sort of thinking, you know, what would it take? We were aware that it was a very multidisciplinary project and that we would need so many different types of expertise, including the expertise of young people. So it was sort of doing the contracting and then really trying to support the collaboration as well.
Okay, so I suppose I come in at 2 different points. So in the first stage of the project, I took very much a backstage pass to the co-design, and that was something led by Griffith University and their team of experts. And my role at that point really was support and guidance, as Sharyn was mentioning before, around some of the best practice frameworks we can be using in this space, but also around safety planning and risk mitigation strategies, about engaging young people around a very sensitive topic, but also young, vulnerable people who may have also experienced sexual violence and abuse themselves. So we had to be very careful in, although we were spending time in what was primary prevention, we still had to be very much aware of who could have been impacted, either directly or indirectly by sexual violence and abuse. So I got to learn so much about the co-design process through that space and seeing how I could bring some of that content expertise as a psychologist and a criminologist and those sort of frameworks to help just guide the process of co-design And then later on, I actually got to be part of facilitation or being partnering into some of those co-design processes, which was a great opportunity for me. And then later on, when we had completed the community workshops, we had this generation of wonderful community ideas, and my job then was to really distill those ideas into something that fit best practice guidelines and under the remit of the project and the funding for the project. So I had sort of different roles throughout that process. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the evidence-informed aspect of this. I've already talked about the public health approach and really drawing on that to look at prevention and response, and also to really target some of those individual level risk factors, as well as the sort of ecosystem that surrounds people in the Toowoomba community, just to ensure that we are really linking into a number of those target audiences as we were starting to map different aspects of the community action plan. So as you have here, we've got the clinical expertise of myself, bringing in also that best practice research, looking at the literature around best practice, and then using that co-design process and those user perspectives to really generate the ideas that we could bring forward for a draft action plan. One of the things I think was really important in this process, and I suppose that's where I'm the engineer in the building of the bridge. We had our planners on one side, we had our community and our co-designers working together, and then it was for me to construct that draft action plan. And for me, it was about having a really clear theory of change and a really strong program logic. If we're going to look at the key determinants in Toowoomba around what is affecting that community, we need to drive the target prevention initiatives to really directly align with those risks and also draw on some of those protective factors. We also needed to look very closely at what the capacity is in the community. One of my key concerns throughout the project is if we're going to build something, we need to sustain it. We need to see continued change, community change, and that community needs to own it and be able to sustain that change over time. There's no point in investing a significant amount of money, bringing this forward to the community, providing hope to the community to do this, and not being able to follow it through in the longer term. So for me, building in that sort of program logic and theory of change to realise that process was a really important aspect of the final development of the draft community action plans. Now, we also had a number of guiding principles for the project. Jill did talk a little bit about these, but some of those, obviously youth-led, and more we see that if we're going to create initiatives, we want to make sure those messages are heard, and they're heard through the channels that young people are going to hear them. So we had to look at how we could ensure that there is sort of collective responsibility of young people to drive and empower change, and that we could learn from them about what the design elements might be. We also had to be community driven because child safety and the prevention of youth sexual and violence and abuse is a community-based responsibility. We all have a role to play in that, and so communities need to invest and own the strategies that they're putting in place and be able to have that drive and the capacity to take it forward. Once we all move out of that those roles, the community then has to take it forward on their own. We've also talked about I think Jordyn talked very much about inclusive practice that we used, making sure that there is key messaging and targeting of different audiences so those messages are heard and meaningful to people involved. And that active participation just comes back to that ownership, that we need to have everybody, a number of people involved. This is not something that people will be cognizant of unless we drive it at multiple levels to be able to really get those messages out and drive those messages home at a broad level. I think you were going to talk, Sharyn, to inclusive.
So the project itself, as we said at the start, aimed to capture the views of different groups that were most at risk or had the highest rates of past experience. So you can see behind us categories like young mums, refugees, migrant community groups, where social practices were very, very different than perhaps are normally typically experienced across other levels of community. And so we came together with those tools And so we'd been asked by that stakeholder group that we first consulted which tools should we actually use. They asked us to use co-design. They asked us to use our creating collective solutions process. So two different ways of starting to work to say, look, what should a prevention program look like for you and other people like you in the community? So that community workshop at the start was very, very critical for how we went out into community, and then yarning circles were applied specifically for the Indigenous group. So we'll talk just a little bit about the ideas and what was actually generated that came actually through. Nadine, do you want to take that?
Okay, so as Sharyn said, there were hundreds of amazing community ideas that were generated through the co-design process, and as I was saying, I had this mammoth task of having to work through those 100 ideas and create something that was sort of feasible and fitted within the remit of the project. We came up with 2 priorities that sort of tried to maximise the most number of strategies that we could encompass, alongside also providing sort of a conduit to other sort of tertiary level support services and other aspects that were really quite a big aspect of the community generation of ideas. It wasn't just about, just about what we can do to change prevention as such, but also what do we need to support young people. So the first one, you'll see the picture behind me, gives you some design elements, but was really around a coordinated community awareness and education campaign, particularly to set the standard of what the Toowoomba community believes are the right attitudes and behaviours, and setting those sort of standards. Also then being able to link to particular resources and raise awareness and education so that people in the community are both know and how to identify these issues, but also how to support and be part of the solution. The second priority is the online community portal, and this sort of to supplement or complement the work that is happening under that larger banner of the community awareness program. And young people were interested both in this being a website that they could connect to through a number of different resources, but also to have a potential app that they could use as well. Again, educational based, interactive, but with stories of young people, with videos and messaging by young people for young people to talk about these issues. So there were the 2. I think we're out of time, so I won't talk too much. But they're the 2 priorities that eventuated from this project.
In terms of the youth-led approach, I guess just briefly, the original idea for the youth-led approach came from the Toowoomba community when we were meeting with different youth organisations at the very beginning of the project. This was one of the suggestions that came up in terms of promoting the youth leadership and listening to what young people had to say. And I have to say, working with young people from my perspective, young people have the most amazing creativity, the ideas they came up with. I certainly could not have come up with those ideas. And just knowing how to communicate with young people, it's been a really amazing process. And young people can be amazing change agents too and have that capacity to make change happen in their communities. So, Jenny, I'll hand over.
I'm actually going to hand this one to Jordyn. Jordan's going to speak a little bit into our Young Voices United committee and talk a little bit about its purposes, aims and terms of reference.
Yeah, so speaking earlier, the Young Voices United committee, it was a group of 10 teenagers from 15 to 18, and we just were coming together really wanting to step into this approach and help our community, and we wanted to provide those leadership opportunities. So for us, it was more about how can we help people, how can we make sure our community is safe, especially growing up in it. We were aiming more to have, we wanted to participate in all the aspects of the community. So we were looking at what can we do, how can we approach it. So social media for us was a big one. Online access, we wanted it to be free. So we really came really diverse. I think we gave so many ideas to you guys for stuff. And yeah, it was just for us working with young people to give us our opinions. It was the first time ever, I think a few of us even got opportunities to voice our opinions, which was great to step into a room and be told whatever you want we'll try and work with was something that a lot of us felt like we heard.
And the young people actually got to work as well a lot with Griffith to really be able to help them feel empowered to be able to co-facilitate some of the sessions, to be able to do some leadership training as well, and to really be able to be those decision makers. Hey.
So the committee itself was established with all the assistance of the service providers, and they put the word out, recruited the people in, and then our job from there, as you've just heard, was to work with them, partly explaining the whole project and what the aim was and what we were trying to do, and working with people where this just wasn't quite in their experience set. So warming them up, helping them to get to understand they really did have a voice here and they could actually contribute in a way. We gave them training on how to do co-design. And importantly, I think, and pleasingly for me, like so many in this team then happily stepped up and helped and participated. Some even ran co-design themselves in their own language, which was pretty amazing to actually work with and to actually see. So if I leave you with one reflection with my involvement as a team across this entire project, and particularly with the Toowoomba case, where we were working with people who have had incredibly different life experiences, the one thing I've learned, over-recruit. Give them a chance too, because life starts to get in their way, and what I would assume is a normal and being easy to participate isn't, for a huge range of reasons that we don't need to discuss here today. So it just taught me, rather than start with 10, maybe start with 30, so that you've got a lot that can see it right through to the end, because they actually want to be there. It's just that sometimes life gets in the way. So I'm going to leave a reflection to everyone else in the group.
I think it was just really important for young people to have their voices feel heard. I really felt like they actually came away feeling like they were genuine decision makers when it came to a lot of the thing. Working in the sector, I often see, people say, I know young people because I work with young people, but they don't have the perspective of the young person themselves. And so being able to have young people have their voices heard and actually feel valued through this process was really, really important for me.
For me, in regard to that, was seeing the world through young people's eyes, and I think, again, I could come in with a number of preconceived ideas, and I got to learn so much through that co-design process of what key messaging and key targeting that needed to happen that would drive some of those sort of high-level aspects of the draft action plan. So I don't think, if it had been me designing it all by myself, I'm sure I would have missed the target on every single person in that age group, but it allowed me to then really pull on those and create the sort of design elements around that.
I guess from the planner perspective, and some of the things I was sort of, some of our learnings along the journey was really thinking about how you can support young people's participation. So in the very early days, before when we were thinking about the project, I met with members of the Minister's Youth Engagement Panel to test ideas about youth-led approaches and how we could support young people's participation. So some of the advice we had there was really you need to value young people's time and contribution. And we developed a reimbursement policy and reimbursed young people with gift vouchers. That was $25 per hour. That was on the advice of Office for Youth and the Youth Engagement Panel. I think it was supporting participation, so transport, looking at childcare where it was required, thinking about interpreters, and negotiate our sort of nominating organisations, also work to get assent from young people and sort of consent and permission from parents and caregivers for participation. So it was really thinking about all the supports you need to put to enable things to, to support that participation and engagement.
I think for me, it comes up to we're going into years where generations are getting more and more vocal about what they want. They want their voices heard and they want their opinions to go out about what the community should see. So to be able to step into a community where we can voice it out, if we didn't like something, we were allowed to say no to it, it felt refreshing because we were allowed to, you know, step into something and go, no, that's not going to work, and be able to be listened to. I think also getting like the most out of the project and knowing that something is going to change in the community, because there were quite a few people in Toowoomba that feel like nothing's going to change. We're never going to, you know, we're just going to go deeper and deeper down a hole of not being able to help teenagers. So to have a community and a project that's working towards it was very, very helpful. A lot of teenagers stepped into it feeling like they're actually going to go on and have a hope and a future for teenagers coming. Yeah.
And do you mind if I just segue from that? In just terms of change, and particularly in this area, change is long term, it's generational. And so we have to actually be engaging and working and including our young people in the vision for the future now, so the next generation have a safer community that they live in compared to what came before. And I think we have had significant shifts in this, in recognising victims' voices in youth sexual violence and abuse. We now need to recognise young people's way in terms of their solutions and ways we can work with them to really sustain that change generationally if we're going to actually reduce the extent and impacts of sexual violence and abuse in our communities. So absolutely concur with you, Jordyn.
Okay, so our last slide as well. Where to next? I guess we've sort of finished the first stage of the project, and we have sort of completed the first stage of co-design. We've pulled together, Sharyn's team pulled together a summary of all the community ideas. Do we have that to hold up?
No.
Did I? Oh, sorry, apologies. We... It is, you can Google it. It is available on the Griffith University website. We also have a draft action plan. Do we have a copy of that to hold up? Oh, sorry, it's in my bag. I can hold it up later. Where we're at now, we are just in the process of releasing the draft action plan and taking that out for community endorsement. So we're really at that stage of closing the loop. We had the workshop to distill all of the ideas and prioritise them, and now we're going back to community and saying, did we get it right? Did we capture what you said, in a really authentic way? Do you have any feedback? So we'll be doing that community engagement with all the different sort of groups of stakeholders, the members of the Young Voices United Committee, testing with other young people too, the community organisations, government agencies, sector, and just sort of getting that final feedback. Once we've sort of got that sort of community endorsement and the final tweaks to the draft action plan, we'll really be moving into the implementation stage of the action plan and the prevention campaign. So that's going to involve commissioning and really also wanting to, in terms of sort of implementing, looking at a consortium that's sort of flagged in the action plan. We're mindful moving forward. It's so many different, it is very multidisciplinary, so many different sort of sets of expertise. It's really sort of looking at our local governance because it is community-led and place-based, re-establishing the Young Voices United Committee to keep informing the work that we're doing, community leadership group. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of the co-design is ongoing. So we have we've worked out what we want in terms of those priorities, but there's still quite a bit of design work to be done. So it's really sort of designing those prevention strategies in detail, commissioning an evaluation, so that which will look both at the sort of process as well as some of the immediate changes, as well as looking sort of longer term. There'll be piloting and user testing and working very closely with our Young Voices United committee in terms of that design and user testing, and then really sort of looking at full implementation with the evaluation. But we have certainly found it's a very reflective process, and I think it's really, in terms of the evaluation, looking at that sort of monitoring, evaluation and learning, and being very reflective as we go along.
So to take that further forward, I'm going to start the questions for you, but at the same time, please start to feed your questions in, and I'll jump back into my MC role very quickly. We do have copies of the report. So Toowoomba Community Ideas is the report that summarises hundreds of people's views. So it's brought it up to the core ideas they expressed. It doesn't necessarily do justice to just how much our team actually learned during that time. There was so much need and so much to be had. Jenny may talk a little bit more about some of the work that's actually run since, and another researcher in the room, Kung Pham's been involved with me with that and piloting a program that's actually starting to gain interest across many other regions. My one reflection: if I were to choose a place and a space to do the work that we did, I would not choose the second largest regional city in Australia to do it in. We walked in, we knew no one, we had not worked on the context. Wow, that was a really big job. Thanks, Jill. So my question, Jordyn, having been involved in the project, what would you do differently if we had to do this again?
I think for me it was came back to just how small the committee was. Like, there were only 10 of us, and I think by the end the number had dropped to about 6 or 7. And so it really felt like, although we had a voice from a lot of communities, like we had one person from each community, if we were to go again, have several people from one community and have a bigger committee would be great, because then we'd get more opinions and more understand further what we needed to put into and implement into the design.
I think the biggest thing, and it's a great reflection, is what I've often found is, especially working with many of the young people we worked with, as I said, have had various number of contributing difficult circumstances happen in their life, and so some of that did actually contribute to their involvement. But absolutely, if we were to keep going, and we were even talking about, re-establishing, who else would we be able to bring in on that? And I think even since COVID, everyone has really re-evaluated what they're involved in, what they want to contribute to, and really look at the areas that they want to, hone in on their passion about. But I think that, people have started to, and including young people, have really started to go, what am I going to be involved in? How much? And do I even want to be a part of this? Even when they're being reimbursed. Many of these young people that we were working with at the time didn't have a job, weren't able to get a job, were either too young or, just had a lot of barriers to employment. So having a reimbursement was a really exciting thing, but it still wasn't enough. So definitely bigger, more people. Yeah. Do you want me to do a quick reflection of? Yeah. Yeah. Not yet. Yeah. Just really quickly, and I could have gone through so many of those reflections, but I don't want to bore you. You can tell that I'm passionate about it. But we got some funding through the Alcohol and Drug Foundation as part of a local drug action team, and through our collaboration through this project, we really saw the work that Griffith was doing, and saw that could be of value to developing a local drug action team in Toowoomba. But the learnings from this project was really about hearing young people's voices and hearing what they want to say, that they know what's going to work for them, for their age demographic, and within the Toowoomba community. And so we were able to take that approach, and we were able to help design a program called Create to Skate, which basically was a 6-week, I can see Krong up there like, yeah, but they were able to actually get a blank deck and to be able to sand it down, then to be able to paint it, actually be able to design, be able to put the grip tape on, be able to paint their design, then put the trucks on, those of you who aren't skaters, that's their wheels. And then actually be able to take at the end of the 6-week program that skateboard home with them. So it meant that it wasn't just something that they could be proud of. You saw their confidence grow. It was something that was developed by young people for young people, but it was also a mode of transport for many young people as well. Many of them didn't know how to skate prior to that, and so we were able to do 3 6-week workshops out of that. We were also able to help develop and grow a grassroots organisation in town as well, to be able to help grow them as mentors. So it's exciting what one thing of, I guess, change project like this can actually then inspire change, and to be able to really reflect on that youth-led approach, which we definitely implemented into the Create to Skate program.
Okay, I have got some questions from the audience, and I'm going to hand this one to you, Jill. How does the government develop the muscle to support a multi-party, multidisciplinary design?
We learned. In terms of that question, supporting collaboration?
Yeah, so how did you get the muscle, I guess, essentially to get the support to do the project?
I guess there was, look, I guess addressing youth sexual violence and abuse was a big priority. There was that recognition of the need for place-based work. So the funding was sort of allocated, and it was a priority area. We had, I would say we had really great senior executive support for the project as well. And I know when I started working on the project, there was a real commitment with the senior executives to a community-led approach. There was a lot of interest within government about place-based approaches, about co-design as well. And we were lucky for this project, a commitment to genuine co-design as well, not just consultation. And we had really amazing support as well for the youth-led approach. So I think it is sort of getting those champions to support those approaches. I think I had really good support from regional staff as well, and I mean, part of this project was also about supporting good integration and collaboration. So we had great support from other regional government agencies, Queensland Health, Department of Education, Department of Seniors Disabilities Services and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander partnerships, Housing and Homelessness Services, Office for Youth. I think when it comes to putting children and young people at the centre of things, it was amazing the support that we had for the project. I think bringing the team together, I know I certainly scratched my head at the beginning thinking, this is really complex. How do we get all of the different skill sets that we need? I've had a lot of support from our commissioning and procurement areas to look at that, and we were very mindful that we were bringing different organisations to work on the project, 2 different universities, Civic Assist, the Young Voices United Committee, and also Sam from Awakening Cultural Ways. So we really did a lot of thinking too about how we supported collaboration at that level. And we started off with weekly meetings, and we were all together working as a team, and we moved to fortnightly. So I think quite a bit of thinking there too. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Jenny, I'm going to direct this one to you, and the reason I'm directing it to you is just because Jenny has so much respect in the Toowoomba community, probably both for herself as an individual practitioner and also the organisation that she works for currently. Like, to be out there in community for the first time where you know no one, and to really understand just how much respect this organisation has, you know they're very, very good at what they actually do. And Jenny, the question for you is, when we work with something so sensitive like violence and abuse prevention, how do you personally protect yourself against this and keep yourself motivated?
What a great question. Absolutely, that is so important. I think, when I first started out in the community services sector, only about 8 years ago now, almost 9 years, I'm very much an empathy person. And so I want to just, if you tell me what's going on, back then I would just be like, oh my goodness, let me carry it for you, let me take this on. I've learnt that I can't do that, because what we, especially through our weekly Youth Street Crew program, we're out on a Thursday night it's an assertive outreach approach, chatting with young people constantly. And it was similar with this type of working with young people. They're telling you, and when they build that rapport and trust, because you might be the only safe adult that they have in their world, they will tell you things that they perhaps haven't told people. To start with, probably just for some of their protection and our own protection, we are known as what's called mandatory reporters. So we would always be upfront with them to say that to them, so that they knew if they were going to share something that had happened to them, that what we would actually need to do with that. Sometimes that would shut their conversation down. Other times it would give them the trust that they needed to know that that was going to happen, and then they'd continue to share. But personally for me, I do find that within our own teams we have a really good debrief structure. So Jess isn't able to be here today, but Jess is still one of our Civic Assist team members, and she was very much, integral in being able to help lead and facilitate a lot of the logistics. But Jess and I would really be able to support each other in that. For this particular project, I also had the support of Nadine, and so if there was any particular areas that we knew was going to be perhaps triggering for young people, we were able to offer them that support as well. But personally for me, it's about having my own safe people. So not only was Jess one of those people, my husband's very different to me, and I don't tell him work things, because it's not that he doesn't care, but his personality is he's in procurement. So so it's important to have someone that you can de-identify, but that you can have as a safe person in your life. Learning your professional boundaries is a really big thing, in being able to know that this isn't mine to carry. I really empathise with what this person's going through, but knowing what your professional boundaries within that structure is. Hopefully I've answered that.
I think you've done a fantastic job. So one of the people in the audience has sort of been thinking about that. What do we actually call Toowoomba? They wondered, should it be T-bar townies?
Townies. I quite like that. I shall take it back to the Toowoomba community and we might get a vote.
And I've got one final question to put to any of you. I think there's a few questions coming through in terms of just like results and looking at the effectiveness of this youth-led approach. And would any of you like to actually comment on, even if it's just professional, anecdotal, early evidence that you have yourself for the power of the approach?
I mean, you gave a great anecdotal sort of example of the latest work that you've been doing, which I think is great. I think we're probably a little bit early at the moment in knowing how this particular project will pan out. Again, from a public health perspective, designing in evaluation from the outset is going to be really, really important, and we've got, to work alongside of understanding and key learnings as we're implementing, as well as what those outcomes are going to be, is certainly something that is the next stage of this project. Certainly we've been reflecting a lot in a recent, we're hoping, publication around some of those youth-led approaches, and I think you spoke really nicely to those, Sharyn, that this is a complex problem that requires multiple skill sets to really drive it, and young people play a key role in that, but there is so much complexity around just involving young people in something as sensitive as this. So I think, from my perspective, the success of hearing what Jordyn has had to say about how they felt heard and empowered through that process is a great start to where this is taking. What we want to see now is how they're engaged in that design and the implementation stage, and to really see what their reflections are about driving that change forward. So whilst we're early, it's promising, I think.
And I think too, just being involved in sort of several different aspects, it was really for me important to like the young people that I'm often working with on a Thursday night often have quite low literacy levels. So I really loved the approach with, even the way that there was yarning circles in some of the approaches. It wasn't always... I guess the feedback was sometimes verbal, especially we had interpreters and that kind of thing. So I think for me it was just really encouraging to see the whole project be so inclusive, but I think it showed us as a team how to work with individual cultural support, individuals within the community and that kind of thing. So for me, being able to have those learnings and being able to take them into working each and every day within the Toowoomba community was really, really valuable. And sorry, one more thing would be just the collaboration. We are actually better together. I think sometimes we work in silos. I'm not going to lie to you, when I first saw that I was going to be working with a professor and a doctors, I'm like, who am I, But the collaboration that has actually happened within all of us has been really, really valuable. And I think, it's that synergistic value which has been really amazing for me.
I think probably the level of engagement as well, because, there were over, 350 community members involved in Toowoomba, and, it was over 100 young people. Just to sort of being able to have that sort of level of reach and engagement for the early design work was really wonderful, and just the amazing contribution of the Toowoomba community and the number of different government and non-government organisations, community-controlled organisations who just provided the most amazing amount of support. I think seeing that collaboration on the ground and the reach of the engagement, that was wonderful.
I'm almost a T-bar townie at the end of this project.
We'll take
That's what happens. Look, I want to give my very special thanks, because having driven myself up to go back a lot, thanks Jenny and Jordyn for coming in today to talk and share with us in person. They will be around at the break if you would like to actually ask some further questions of them. I've just about got through most questions that came through here, but very conscious that time is up. So I just want to give, on behalf of everyone, a huge thank you to Jill, to Nadine, to Jenny, and also to Jordyn for coming in and working with me today. It's been great. Thank you. So this is where we go off cuff. Now, I haven't done this before, so I'm really hoping someone's ready to actually say, I'd love to have a microphone, I've got a problem or a something and I just want to talk to it. So I'm really hoping I'm not hanging myself out there and that no one's going to come and play, because otherwise they're here ready to dance and sing. So if you don't come forward, it could be that we put on a whole show for you, and I'm telling you that might not be pretty either. Now, if you want to actually shoot it through to me in a Slido, or if you just want to come up and actually talk a little bit about your work and what you do, now is your time. So the stage is fully open. It's over to you. Oh, thank you, David. It's so kind that you've come up to actually take the stage. This is great.
Hi, everyone. My name's David Pembroke. I'm the founder and CEO of Content Group, and we've been a partner in putting this together, so thanks very much. Really not to tell you, or actually just to tell you, a couple of weeks ago, I was lucky enough to be invited to the OECD in Paris to a meeting of the expert panel on public sector communication. And the good news is that the OECD has started to recognise the work that you're all involved in, and they're at the very beginning of the journey of understanding just how important public sector communication is. And there's going to be the opportunity to sort of build a global community around public sector communication. I think this morning we've seen, this wonderful examples of work, whether it be, you know, the research that's being done in New Zealand around humour, it's the koalas, it's just the program that we've just seen now. So there's so much to sort of draw together. But the encouraging thing is that an economic organisation who are really, you know, interested in, generally not that interested in public sector communication, have now recognised just how important it is as we deal with, you know, challenges around democracy and trust in public institutions. So that's just a little bit of a report back, actually, the fact that it's happened. I'm based in Canberra and we work with the federal government, and obviously the federal government are very interested around that. Open government movements, all sorts of things around. So I think the really exciting thing for all of us in the room today and everyone listening is that really you might have been at it for a long time, you've been working at it for a long time. Well, slowly but surely, you know, the impact that you're having is getting through. So it is I think we're almost coming towards the tipping point, and all this great research and work and other things, it's really going to join together, and it's going to be a very exciting time for everyone involved in this very important work. So thanks, Sharyn, to you for leading, as you always do, and good luck with all the work that you do about the place.
And just because you came up, we have a special little something to say. Thanks, David, for coming forward. Isn't it amazing how when we put a mic up in front of people, everyone just goes absolutely silent? Surely one of you's got something else that you'd actually love to share.
Hello, my name's Ashley. I am from the Central Coast in New South Wales, so I've flown up. I work for Central Coast Council, local government, and I also work for Toowoomba Zoo in Sydney, if anyone's familiar with the zoo. And my area of expertise is in environmental education, so I'm really passionate about conservation behaviour change, the human dimensions of wildlife conservation and sustainability and biodiversity. So I'm a teacher and I work in local government, developing lots of amazing community-based programs to try and encourage the community to get on board with things that they can do in their daily lives to help protect our environment. But I guess I feel like I'm potentially at a sort of tipping point, and I guess I want to throw this out to everyone here to potentially brainstorm, but I've really focused a lot on individual behaviour change, what each little individual person can do in their daily lives to help make a difference. And I think I'm coming to a realisation that that little drop in the bucket is quite tiny, and if we really want to make massive, large-scale, sort of global impacts, I feel like we're not really talking about the big picture, the big businesses, the governments, the corporations, the big ag, the big industry, the big developers that are actually driving a lot of the threatening processes that are affecting our environment. So I guess I feel like through all of the amazing community programs that I develop, where we ask people to pick their lawn clippings up and put them in the bin so that they don't go into the waterways and increase nutrient loading, that we're not then looking at council, who I work for, who are using the big massive council lawnmowers which don't have catches on them. Like, that's not going in the bin. We ask people, use less fertilisers and pesticides in your garden, try and grow your gardens organically. But then we have these massive turf farms, these massive ag plots that are just using so much fertilisers and pesticides and getting away with it. We ask people, don't cut down that tree, plant more trees on your property. But then we have these massive developers, these massive farmers coming in and just taking like massive areas of land and completely deforesting and destroying habitat. And I feel like we're not really holding those people to account. We're not holding the big business and the big companies and the big governments to account. And it's making me feel like all of the community-based work that we're doing is kind of reaching that tipping point. People are going like, why am I being hammered as an individual? Why is it up to me to change every single little behaviour in my life? Like, when I then see these big corporations, these big businesses not being held accountable. So how can we like maybe switch over to a more advocacy-based approach, or like a consumer choice-driven approach, where we try and somehow engage that that community movement, the desire for everyone to make a change, but actually direct that energy to where it can actually make a big difference. So if anyone has any thoughts, I'd really love to hear about it and collaborate. Everyone agrees, but no one knows the answer.
I think I could pick. I'll do it this way. I reckon I could pick on a few people in this room. So Karina Roma could talk about different ways you can start to pull stakeholders together. So Karina, just wave like gently from the back there. Yep. So if you just chat together at afternoon tea, that would be really good. Is Louisa in the room or outside somewhere? Renata? A couple of others. So they've been working on some of those issues, and the first thing that happens if you go out to community and say, please pick up your lawn clippings, they do say, why aren't we asking council to do that? So legitimately to engage, assuming you've got budget, so that's always a big one, can we now actually have multi-pronged, multi-stakeholder and going up and downstream so that you're coming from every which direction. But that was a lovely, lovely presentation to put out there and just say, I need help. There are a lot of people in this room that can actually happily chat and start to talk about what next and how next. Yeah, that's great. And Sandra's got a little something for you as well. She'll chase you around. Is there anyone else who would like to come up and actually either talk about something current or a case or anything else that you would like to share? All right, if the answer is no, we have outside 4 exhibitors. Oh, UA would love to. All right, you've got to come down. I had actually predicted that UA would love to share. I really should have bet on that.
Hello, everyone. Snake. My name is Yue. I'm a new PhD student, and Sharyn is my supervisor. Yeah, and Karina Roma is my supervisor too. Yeah, I'm doing e-waste recycling research, and meanwhile, I'm trying to approve using COM-B, capability, opportunity, and motivation behavior theoretical framework to improving our e-waste recycling problem. And I've done my first study. I've done 19 interviews of open-ended qualitative research with interviews that I got some insights which are very impressive. And I would love to invite you all to scan the QR code and help me share your ideas about how do you usually tackling your e-waste, your old unwanted devices at home, and your cell phone, your microwave, bigger devices, or just focus on your smart devices, your laptop, and even your earphones, anything with a battery. And that'll be really good to have your insights from either your answers or you have any concerns about how to deal with your own electronic devices. Thank you very much. Please scan the QR code, and I will answer as much as I can during the chatting time. Thank you very much.
So yes, if you haven't met UA yet, very, very passionate about e-waste, and she will be very happy to speak to you about what she's already learned, but you can see she's only weeks into the start of her actual PhD journey. So the framework she was talking about would actually address the problems around how to deal at the bigger picture level. If you hadn't heard of it before, Susan Mickey over in the UK developed the COM-B theory. And what that talks about is individuals. So what are their own internal and extrinsic motivations? Because sometimes we can just give people incentives like a free beer to come up and talk. And it's non-alcoholic beer provided to us, just to make sure you're all aware of that. That is a great start. So individuals, because they can start to move things and certainly get a groundswell of individuals. You've got yourself an advocacy movement and change is going to start to kick in. But then there's other influences that sit around individuals as well, and that's where the opportunity part of COM-B comes in, because it says what are the social and built structures that may support or deny that thing from happening in the first place. And then the C stands for capability. So sometimes it's great, you can motivate someone, but do they actually have what it takes to do it? Do they know how to do it? And that's where some of that early work around koalas that we're working on is a big... At the moment, people just don't know, and we have to also then make sure, once they know, how to actually action all of that. So it is a good theory framework to, set the picture and start to actually take a look at things. Now, we have outside a series of people who've actually joined the Change event to actually exhibit and talk about some of the work that they actually do. And you may not have realised that the exhibitions outside are actually attached with us. So we have the bat rescue team from Queensland here. Go and visit them and learn what they actually do. Next to them, we have someone who's actually using organic cotton and making sustainable stuff, which I must go and do some shopping and check out myself. Next to that is Plastics Oceans Australia, and then also another oceans team who do a lot of protection work. So go and chat to those teams. And if you'd like to actually experience a little bit of virtual reality and how Timo Dietrich and his team actually work with thousands of adolescents to actually improve their capabilities, so can they now actually say no to peer pressure around drugs, alcohol, drinking, then please go and visit James and the team out there and try the VR headset and go to the house party. So with no further ado, I might let you out for an afternoon break. We will be back pretty much at the 3:30, but as usual, the bell will be out there jangling to drag you back in. So go have a bit of a play, explore some of the exhibits, enjoy an afternoon tea or coffee if you actually would like to. Thank you.